Welcome to another edition of Secular Sports, and this is going to be a pretty long one considering what topics this one subject matter delves into. Obviously, the Hamilton Ticats either made a big snafu or escaped a big trap by not naming Art Briles to their coaching staff earlier this week. Well, even though Jones deserves some criticism for what he did in actually giving a damn about a scandal-driven, uh, phonily, phonily religious, phonily religious scandal-walking scumbag like Briles. For him to even consider such a person is quite a, no pun intended, but slap in the face to a lot of people he's offended, especially many of the women who were assaulted by many of Browse's players. Well, even though Briles had guided Baylor to wins, and we have players like Robert Griffin III and Terrence Williams not committing crimes off the field, Briles largely was responsible for many of the sexual assaults that had taken place. There have been three players indicted for sexual assaults aimed at female students in this past decade: Sean Oakman, Sam Okawachu, and Tevin Elliott, as Oakman is awaiting trial and is likely to get convicted. Elliott and Okawachu have been sentenced and are currently serving jail time. What's creepy about this whole ordeal is that Briles has been known to be one of these typical self-proclaimed religious people that act as if religion is his salvation. He has talked about how religion had helped him overcome the tragic loss of his two parents and aunt when they were traveling to go see him play a football game. And as he had once said, you structure your life to the principles in the Bible, and your reward in the end. Well, he was rewarded. He was rewarded millions of dollars in back pay for pretty much creating a hostile campus atmosphere and pretty much enabling football players to rape a bunch of women because the team was pretty good. But when you see people like him and other people wearing their faiths on their sleeves, it, trouble will ensue. Trouble will ensue. Jim Tressel, formerly of Ohio State, was known to be openly religious and wear his religiosity on his chest, and simultaneously players like Maurice Claret had been receiving extra academic assistance from academic advisors. Such benefits included receiving possible illegitimate courses or swapping legitimate courses for independent studies so that his academic experience could be much easier. In addition, he could skip classes, still pass them, and there would be academic advisors, selected professors who would be generous to him. The Obviously we know about Ohio State's and its illicit benefits. Claret got his share of benefits like free cars or a lot of free goods, much of which was stolen, by the way, in a car that he had driven in mid 2003. Well, he was ultimately gone, and clearly nothing got corrected. Sure, athletic director Andy Geiger may have been let go, and he supposedly retired back in 2005, but in 2011, there were numerous Ohio State players that had exchanged their memorabilia for tattoos, but but obviously they were suspended for 5 games. But when they were suspended is what we'll get to later. William Swan, former board of trustees at St. Bonaventure, waved a religious card around, wearing it on his sleeve, showing pride for his alma mater, a place that had Catholic values, and even though he had been openly religious, he had decided to actually sacrifice it and put up a cover up by having a welding certificate junior college transfer who was ineligible to play. He was willing to have that person on his basketball team so that his team could make the NCAA tournament. They were investigated, everything went to hell, and tragically, William Swan had hung himself in his own closet back in 2003. He left his wife as a widow, and Bonaventure has not been really relevant ever since. And when you think of like Baylor and this like the typical, oh, I'm a faithful person, we're a place of faith, we are moral because of our faith, and we try to have a place that tries to preach institution of higher learning in sports, to try to have them coincide at once. When you have all this take place, but then you also have seen their tragic outcomes, kind of analogous to Penn State, you wonder why Baylor is not one bit under any sanctions, why it's not one bit under any trouble. Well, when you look at the history of people under sanctions or being given infractions, it seems like it's based on the player or the team or maybe even the coach becoming relevant. For example, the irrelevant players or teams or maybe even coaches that were sanctioned ranged in under these following circumstances. In 2003, Rick Majerus had given his then player Keith Van Horn a free lunch amidst the death of his father because he felt sorry for him, and it was during the time that Utah had been in the Final Four in 1998. As a result, it received 3 years of probation and had recruiting restrictions and scholarship limits because Rick Majerus had given a benefit to a player that he couldn't give an actual student. Yeah, God forbid that you actually be nice to somebody amidst a tragedy like the loss of your father. Back in 2010, we all know about Pete Carroll, ditching USC last minute and heading over to the Seattle Seahawks. However, people forget that that USC was not under a BCS bowl. It had not been playing in a BCS bowl at the time with its then quarterback Matt Barkley. Due to the fact that it was not BCS bound and it had a 7-6 Tennessee Volunteer Lane Kiffin as its coach, Pete Carroll in the NFL, and the fact that there were other schools that looked more BCS bound, the fact that the sanctions of 10 scholarship losses and postseason bans and extra years of probation coming after Pete Carroll left showed you that it was really about relevance. Pete Carroll was an icon. Coaches are always the face of the schools, kind of like the way that they have always been. John Calipari is the icon at Kentucky. Mike Krzyzewski is the icon at Duke. And at some point, Jim Harbaugh was the icon at Stanford, while we know about Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban. Well, when you look at a Carroll-less Trojans, they don't look less relevant because a guy like Lane Kiffin is not a good marketing arm. He's not a good face or a person that would bring in a lot of TV attention. Plus, when you're sort of out of it in the BCS game, you are not one bit a ratings draw the way that the then Stanford Cardinal had become under Jim Harbaugh. Subsequently, in 2012, there had been a New Mexico guard. New Mexico. Yeah, like anybody gives a shit about that school. Jamal Fenton had a 21st birthday and received a $250 discount on a ballroom, and as a result, due to the fact that it was an impermissible benefit, a discount on a ballroom, he was suspended 3 games because it violated NCAA rules. Later that year, if not around that time, the Jerry Sandusky scandal had finally concluded. He went to jail for about 30 years, thank God, and amidst the Louis Freeh report. And let's just also bring up the fact that Penn State had come off a 1-3 finish under interim Tom Bradley right after Joe Paterno left in disgrace. It lost 40 scholarships over 4 years and had 4 years of postseason bans. And obviously, probation ensues afterward. Well, Penn State became good again, and obviously it's not as powerful as it used to be. But maybe had it been a BCS bound team and it not had finished 1-3 under Bradley, probably 3-1, you wouldn't have seen the crap that you had seen afterward. And the NCAA pretty much showed what a joke the whole scheme was by actually giving Joe Paterno his wins back and even giving scholarships back to the school right after Bill O'Brien had left. O'Brien had, for those who don't remember, had succeeded Tom Bradley right after Tom Bradley failed in his only shot at being a head coach. But but to bring up what a joke the NCAA is, they have now shown how relevance matters in how you get suspended, in how you deserve sanctions. In 2011, I had mentioned how Ohio State had 5 players suspended in the 2011 season, but the incident that they had committed, which was exchanging memorabilia for tattoos, they got to play in the bowl game. They got to play in the bowl game. However, because the bowl game was up, stars like Terrell Pryor were kind of relevant. Having them suspended for 5 games was a lot more fitting. Terrell Pryor was not the star that Cam Newton was. He definitely wasn't that idiot quarterback that no one should hear about ever again from Florida. Well, when you look at that whole school, the fact that Terrell Pryor was was not Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, the idiot Florida quarterback, the fact that he wasn't any of those guys, the NCAA felt okay, obviously, to suspend the players for 5 games. Plus, there was a chance that Ohio State could rebound and maybe make its way to the BCS and be the lone Big Ten representative, play in the Rose Bowl, and then give the NCAA some good ratings and money draws. But God forbid that they actually make it about consistency and integrity. And integrity definitely was lacking when you look at the next player. Cam Newton had never been penalized for his dad, Cecil Newton, trying to solicit money from potential recruiters. Mississippi State had been one, Auburn had been the other. He hadn't been suspended. Auburn faced no sanctions. They won the championship, and the rest was history. Johnny Manziel had been suspended for just 1 half because he was he had signed autographs illegally under NCAA rules. However, as the reigning Heisman champion and the fact that he was one of few individual players that could beat Alabama, he got to just sit out 1 half, and it just so happened to be against a pretty weaker Rice University team. Well, to further bring up how relevance makes you less worthy of any heavy sanctions, in 2015, the Baylor Golden Bears had gone 10-3 in Art Briles' last year, right before he was fired. They had a chance to obviously be relevant again. The scandal, to a degree, has died under because Kenneth Starr is gone, and Briles will never be back in the news again, other than this awful time right now in Hamilton. Baylor had a chance or some form of relevance to be good. They finished 7-6. Okay, not great, but it's not Tom Bradley. It's not Tom Bradley 1-3. But it comes to show you how much your relevance matters and how much your talent matters. Because when your talent or relevance do not measure up to the standards or in the eyes of the NCAA will figure out a different punishment for you. The better you are, the more you get away with, the more you have a smaller punishment. The less relevant you are, the more you lose, the likelier you will be punished severely. Which brings me to my last example for relevance. UNC. Like, they haven't been in the news much. Like, they haven't done anything scandalous, like falsifying courses. doing kids' homeworks, accepting kids into their programs when they could barely read their ABCs? Well, for 2 decades, if not 18 years straight, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill had paper courses and were rightfully, given a whistleblow by their academic advisor, Mary Willingham. Willingham had talked about how she would actually pronounce or work with the pronunciations of a word that would begin with a letter like C, and they would have a bunch of athletes in paper courses, primarily African American studies and minoring in Swahili. It's gross. It's gross. I mean, getting black people to do black courses in a black language. I mean, it just, come on, you might as well just have them major in hip hop and minor in ebonics. You just might as well do that. It's just so gross. Well, after all of that, they're still investigating. They're still going through a hearing. They're still going through all of this punishment determination. Meanwhile, they have won 2 championships over the past 12 years, while all of these bogus paper courses and Swahili classes had been taking place. And what is so dumb about the people in this country when they look at this fake champion, this supposed men's basketball national champion, they fail to realize that UNC is not the exception. It might as well be the rule. Back in 2003, the NCAA lifted all of its SAT and ACT minimum requirements for athletes while inserting stricter graduation rates, if not having mandates that the athletes graduate in more proper time. Well, with the graduate and no SAT ACT standard swap, the classroom scandals have finally been erupting. In the previous decade, you get rid of the SAT and ACT score minimums in exchange for slightly stiffer graduation requirements. However, in this decade, this is where all of the academic scandals finally brew. In the past college season, Notre Dame had to vacate all of its victories and BCS appearance from its 2012 season after its trainer had been doing improper aiding or actual homework of 8 athletes on the team that season. As a result, the school had a 1-year probation, had to pay a $5,000 fine. Meanwhile, the trainer, under NCAA sanctions, has to stay away from the campus for at least 2 years. But I have to bring back up the whole relevance-irrelevance factor. Guess how well Notre Dame did last season? Guess how well the record was for them in 2016. 4-7. 4-7. They're under sanctions and get the punishment, while North Carolina is just one step away from getting another championship for Roy Williams. I mean, you hope that they take it away, but I don't know if it's going to happen. I just don't trust the NCAA with its inconsistent penalization. Well, Notre Dame as a 4-7 team is a lot more punishable because it's not one bit relevant or not one bit a ratings draw in comparison to an imminent champion like UNC men's basketball. It seems like all of the investigations take place or are either deliberately done later, and then when the timing is right, and the timing is only good when the ratings don't matter and the money doesn't matter, but bad when they actually do. When the timing falls into the right place, that's when the NCAA will actually create punishments. And frankly, Notre Dame was disappointing because it was the supposed smart school, it was like, maybe one of the few, places where people had talked about how the school had sacrificed um, athletics for academics. They acted as if they were willing to not go to the BCS just so that they could be an academically respectable institution. Well, not every elite school exactly does it the way people think Notre Dame does it. Not everybody, operates in the according to the perception that people had of Notre Dame. Back in 2008, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution had a 54 school sample size during the 1600 SAT era, and it had found that football players and men's basketball players had scored between 220 and 227 points less than their non-athlete counterparts. Such schools had included elite ones like Georgia Tech, Cal Berkeley, UCLA, and Michigan. And if you had scaled these disparities in the 2400 era, and for those who don't remember or forgot, the original score had been 1600, but then it got increased to 2400 due to a writing portion being added for high school graduates who had been set to graduate in 2006. For if you were to scale the disparities for the 2400 level, the disparities would be between 330 and 340 and a half. Well, only Georgia Tech in the 1600 era not only had a score of at least 1,000, but it actually met the national average score of 1028, or a score that was in the 1020s. Every year from 2000 to 2005, the average score would always be in the 1020s, and when Georgia Tech's point disparity was over 300 points less than its entire student body, it pretty much tried to prove that its athletes had to be average now to not only get in, but its athletes were only good enough to just be the typical students in the country. And that doesn't say much when Cal Berkeley and UCLA, Michigan, all three schools such as those, three schools who brag about their elite reputations, that brag about their high academic standards, they had average scores of 998 or lower. 998 or lower out of the 1600 era. So you have to be nationally average just to get into Georgia Tech, but you have to be below nationally average just to get into schools that were comparable or just better than Georgia Tech. And these are top 40 schools. And when you have schools like Cal, UCLA, and Michigan having the 990-ish scores, all you're saying is that in the 2400 era, you can have a score of less than 1500 in order to get in. In schools such as those, you have to get about a 2000 out of 2400. If not, you probably have to get maybe 300 points more, or maybe 400 points more, especially with the writing being graded separately now. Remember, the 1600 score is what it is today. The writing is graded separately. And when you have and when no student could ever get into such schools with these embarrassing scores, even if they were scaled back to modern standards, it just shows you what lack of integrity the NCAA schools will have, just so that they could have good teams on the field or on the court. Well, sure, there are many critics that are alarmed by the inconsistencies, but there are a lot of supporters who actually don't care because they're dumb enough to think that academically inept people or unqualified people are actually worthy of academic admissions. Well, I'll give credit to ESPN analyst Jay Billis, who is an ardent opposer of the NCAA rules. He has talked about how he has a nephew who is under an academic scholarship. His nephew, who doesn't have to play sports but just go to class, he can profit off of anything he makes he can make money off of pretty much anything he does. He's put under no restrictions. Meanwhile, athletes, individuals who have to supposedly go to class but ball out, they have to have all these severe restrictions where they can't make money off of their name, they can't accept any kind of illicit benefit, they can't accept rewards, clothes, gear, any kind of goods. They can't receive any of that. Yet when they do, by technicality, two things, the person who can do one thing while both are under scholarships can do whatever the hell he wants, or whatever the hell she wants. That's what they're pretty much saying. More under athletics, but less in academics. The one who has to do less while only has to go to class can do whatever the hell he or she wants. Something is lopsided about that. I don't know how anybody can condone all these extreme restrictions for student athletes, individuals who have to, again, go to class and play sports. People such as them, they have to have all the restrictions on earth, but those who have to only go to class while getting the same reward that student athletes get, a scholarship, they can do whatever the hell they want in comparison. It's bullshit. And even though it's great that at least Jay Billis points out such a problem, he, as well as many other people, fail to realize that there are 460,000 NCAA scholarships given to athletes inside the NCAA, and that's throughout the country. Meanwhile, 20.4 million people are expected to attend college this fall. Simultaneously, there are 2.5 million people that have PhDs, and 40% of them have debt burdens of an average of $37,000. 51% of current professors of the country are just adjuncts, meaning that they're part-time, not permanent, and don't get any benefits, retirement or health. And in this new documentary, Professors in Poverty, the producers point out how 34,000 graduates with doctorate or PhD degrees actually applied for food stamps in 2010. 31% of them live below the poverty line, and the professor pay is so poor that even though the data is pretty conflicting, there is not really much of a gain based on the information that's available. Professors in Poverty's producers showed that the pay for professors is down by 49% between the years 1970 and 2008, while Buzz Bissinger, the author of Friday Night Lights, has spoken in an Intelligence Squared debate before, and in that Intelligence Squared debate back in 2012, he talked about how the professor pay only went up by 30% between 1986 and 2007. I mean, whether it's a 70% decrease during a separate period or a 30% increase in another period, the pay is quite embarrassing. And the pay can be so embarrassing that the rate can be as low as $22,500 per year. Meanwhile, a president can make $400,000 a year on average. It's up by 70% between the years 1970 and 2008, while it may even be up by 100% between the years 1986 and 2007. Based on what you're seeing in college and how more people are saying that college is not worth the cost that it's set at today, you can make the argument that the presidents have all done a bad job and are pretty much not worthy of the pay that they're getting. Based on the tuition increases in the following schools, it doesn't. You definitely know. You definitely know how full of shit the president is, especially when he or she can pretty much can make rules as they go along, cut out programs, not make college what it used to mean, and at the same time, you are likely going to be in a debt burden of a quantity as large as $30,000. Typically, that's what the average is: $30,000 of debt. Well, You want to know why you are probably in $30,000 of debt? Here are the increases in tuitions in three different types of schools. In private not-for-profit tuitions, or in private not-for-profit schools, I should say, the tuition has had a 179% increase between the years 1995 and 2015. For out-of-state public, the increase has gone up by 220% during the same time span. For in-state public institutions, the tuition increase has gone up by 296%, all in the same time frame. And when the vast majority of the schools are running institutions that have alumni and maybe even students that burden debts that total up to $1 trillion, and you have underemployment ranges that could go between 25 to 60%, the pay for a president is looking quite unwarranted. The pay that a president is getting is looking quite embarrassing based on the returns that his or her alumni are receiving. When you look at like how they're working with sports, they're pretty much making it first and foremost. A typical school will pay a student athlete, and a student athlete will cost 7 times more than a normal student. 91,000 versus 13,000. They have the presidents will double up the men's basketball and football coaching salaries over a decade. They will eliminate academic programs just so they could expand sports departments. Case in point, University of Florida, in that 2012 debate that Buzz Bissinger took part in, Florida had got rid of its computer science department, something that's an actual skill and a field that involves great intellect. That department has to go, but the Gators can still suck, and more than likely, I'm sure that Urban Meyer is still being paid, because that's just how irresponsible the school has been with its own money. We also brought up the professors that the presidents in the schools are not adequately compensating, and they've also had reckless increases in expenditures in areas that you would have never thought about maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Severance pay for coaches or athletic administrators has gone up by 120% between 2004 and 2014. In the same time period, facilities expenditures have gone up by 89%. Coaching pay, as I mentioned, doubled. Well, according to this study, and all of these numbers have been provided by the Washington Post, coaching pay has gone up by 85%. Administration pay, 69%. You thought that maybe I'm going over the line and I might be trying to make this theory that, sports is the only reason tuition goes up. Well, look at all the attractions that presidents will put on their campuses. And some of these are actually used as recruiting tools for athletes. You have universities that have arcades, resort swimming pools, and lazy rivers in a place that was known for hard work. Well, they are at universities in Division I programs like High Point University in North Carolina, LSU and UCF, and in at least 2 of those 3 schools, such luxuries are used to bring extra athletes over. And I mean, you hope that none of these, no graphic incidents take place on campus. However, there is a growing concern about sexual assaults taking place, according to 2 polls done by Washington Post and the Kaiser Family Foundation, along with the Association of American Universities. Between 20 to 25% of women surveyed have said that they have been assaulted in some way, shape, or form on a college campus during their tenures. Chegg, the notable textbook website, talked about how half of all students they surveyed worry about campus shootings, and a third of their students polled said that they don't feel safe on or near campuses. When you have all these aforementioned concerns and these stupid expenses just to um, it not just increase revenues, but to lure even more applicants. You're saying that education is taking a back seat while you, the administrator, or your president, have bank accounts that none of us will ever be able to meet, even if we lived two lifetimes and went to college and grad school in each of those lifetimes. And and I'm not, and I didn't even include the $200 million that come from rejected or applicants who are not qualified to go to school, or as we should all call them, NCAA athletes. Come on. I mean, yeah, you could ball out and be an illiterate and get in, but if you're an illiterate but can't ball out, bye bye. Bye bye. You are one of many people who helped universities make $200 million off of rejections. Congratulations. Uh, but yeah, there might be an unethical revenue stream that benefit universities, but revenue streams that are in existence, especially when it comes to sports, um, they're not exactly in the best place for universities right now. For sports, there is TV money, but in certain cases, there, they, I don't want to say that there's a TV sports bubble, but the money that might be coming in now may not be coming down the road. The Pac-12 network has had its current operating problems. No one really gives a shit about the Big Ten network, and the Mountain West, with its TV problems, decided to go streaming, which doesn't make as much money in comparison to television. With streaming being the option, while TV is the lesser of is the lesser one, and the possible TV revenue being or coverage revenue being much smaller in comparison to traditional TV, it doesn't seem like the universities are timing things properly, especially when we have the tuition bubble likely set to burst, probably resulting in declining enrollments, better educational alternatives, um, educational enrollments declining because of high costs. Um, it could mean that they not only cut more departments, but they would also end certain graduate schools. Indiana Tech and Florida A&M are two schools that have cut out their entire law schools, and thus have screwed over many people who haven't even graduated on time enough to even take the bar. Um, and in addition to grad and undergrad programs that would have to be cut out, the universities will ultimately have to cut out sports too. And and when you have these timing problems and these exorbitant costs and rising tuition fees, it's about time that the universities scale back and not make it about luxuries or things that would attract applicants anymore. They have to make it about academics for a change. If they want to, and they want happier students and students who will be more educated and stay in their schools the long term, the first thing that they should do is not increase costs. And they also should not hire and fire coaches and wrongfully admit sham students while creating bogus classes for them. With the fact that a rough majority, depending on the poll, 47% to 73% would like free or debt-free college, either might be impossible, but it would not hurt to decrease college costs, if not avoid increasing them. If you have lower costs, if not to lower costs, presidents should decrease the number of sports that they have at their schools, have like almost fewer or no scholarship athletes, opt out of the NCAA, if in the NCAA, create a brand new rule book and have more practical rules. Simultaneously, they should substitute exorbitant coaching pay for better teaching salaries that prospective professors would want to get to. In addition, they should also give them better health coverage. Sports should only be covered under television or media rights, and instead of scholarships with also NCAA rules gone, these schools are better off paying their athletes minimum wage under 40-hour work weeks, travel less, and maybe even and also let them get outside revenue and endorsement opportunities so that the tuitions do not have to go to the athletes. No tuition fees have to make athletes even richer. In addition, if athletes are not good enough to get into the school by their own academic merits, they should just be treated the way that students treat DJs, bartenders, and if you're a Duke lacrosse player, a stripper. They're they're for fun, they're for entertainment, and they should only be paid salaries or wages. Who gives a shit about what education outcome that they have? Because the chances of them being qualified for that education is pretty tiny. It's as tiny as Appalachian State actually going to a BCS bowl game. Um, in addition, coaches. Who gives a shit? They've already earned their pay. It makes sense to pay them anymore. They're already, worthless based on their academic merits, just the way the athletes are. I mean, God forbid that we actually value a professor for a change. Well, I hope that maybe these are good suggestions. I hope that maybe this shows why college sports pretty much have to die, because the more we channel the money into 2% of the college population, which is the 460,000 athletes, and a small number of leaders versus the vast number of people who would be far more educationally influential, professors, the more we'll make our students go broke, and the longer we're gonna have schools take part in the NCAA, it'll lead to more cover-ups, scandals, and greater needs to circumvent academic rules, cover up crime, and reluctantly commit infractions that shouldn't even be in rule books in the first place. The thing with the NCAA is that it has far more problems financially and morally than a school could withstand, and as a result, it has resulted in many people taking part in all these cover-ups. It's okay. It's okay. The rules are stupid. The cost to withstand these rules are even worse, and more people, the people who make up the greater part of the universities, the professors and the students, they're getting harmed as a result. There's no pay for them. There is greater debt for many of them, and frankly, in the long term, the university will suffer too. The university cannot try to exist in the NCAA while try to be a moneymaker off of fake money like student loans. And clearly the presidents, the administrators, and athletic directors, coaches, they're probably all riding on high horses and feeling victorious, especially when they get the big victory against the conference rival. But when the party that they are holding crashes and there's no cash flow for them and their school anymore, there will be nothing to write on to afterward. There will be no celebrations going forward. There will be presidents that will ultimately be replaced, and the university life that we all once thought of will probably die. There will be fewer populated campuses, and there will be affiliate campuses that may close down too because they're too difficult to afford. And the businesses that were thriving because of the campus populations and the number of people that attended, they could go down because they don't have enough cash flow or people to spend money on their products. Don't be surprised if endowments decrease because there are so few sources of revenue, and and due to the fact that we have $1 trillion mess with our alumni, our our collection of universities alumni, they'll be too bitter to give back, and it may just be a small country club at alumni associations down the road, and I and it won't be the magic that we all once felt. In addition, students will be left less educated, especially in comparison to the rest of the world who have cheaper educations but have smarter students. We don't need the PISA test to show that people in Germany and Canada and New Zealand are far better off. People mock their university systems and act as if it's socialist, but we're going to be we're going to be at a rate that's worse than the consequences of socialism the longer we try to have fake money and exorbitant costs be the way that a university shall be built. It definitely will not help if we let the university's revenue model be predicated on luxuries and forms of entertainment, which is all what sports are. And frankly, we'll be dumber and inferior to our international counterparts that we will regret wasting any time. We will have remorse and second thoughts of what we were doing when we were trying to watch Oregon take on Cal, or LSU take on Texas A&M. It just doesn't make it will bite us in the butt down the road. And this leads me to recite a quote from Rutgers University professor Mark Killingsworth, who is one of the few people that actually openly criticized his own university for its exorbitant costs, considering that the costs and the expenses are going in the wrong direction. We face a lot of international competition, and I don't think the people who've been blessed and entertained aren't going to be the best at facing international competition. And that quote could not be further from the truth, because when we are trying to make our campuses all about fun, and it's going to be at the expense of people who can't afford to go there, the university model in the United States is clearly broken. It clearly is, and the longer people keep justifying this all for few instead of more for all, if not more for the masses. Enjoy your debt. Enjoy your willingness to not see the pain of others that suffer, and most importantly, keep living a lie that you continue to want to live. When trying to create a revenue streaming model off of fake cash and expenses to be on nothing academic whatsoever, there could not be a greater lie than that which is practiced by the American universities that exist to this day.